There we go. Now you can hear me. Jump right back into it. Happy Monday, everybody. I know it's not always, anyway, it's hard to jump right back in sometimes. For me, I know we've got this schedule going, and I think it's working okay. But you know, like I say, we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we've got this kind of gap, you know, in the schedule, and then we come back to it. So sometimes hard to kind of shift gears and get back into school mode. I have noticed some people posting some stuff to Discord, so that's great. If you guys have questions, and I know there's a quiz coming up in the hardware class, and I would encourage you guys to reach out to other students. So if you want to use the chat feature in Canvas, you can. Discord seems to have a little more real time for it, and it's you guys can have an app on your phone, obviously. So make use of that. If there's questions that you want to have more information on, you can bring those up in class. You know, if you have a question about something. So we were just talking about a few minutes ago, the question about the KVM switches was a little goofy because it was talking about, you know, a single device versus multiple devices. KVM switches are still used on certain pieces of equipment. Jose's got a question, but a lot of times once you get stuff set up on, you know, in server racks and things like that, what you're using, it would be like remote desktop or maybe SSH to connect to it. KVM switches are basically a hard switch where you've got a single keyboard, video monitor, and a mouse, and then you can switch to different pieces of equipment using keyboard shortcuts or even a little box that you push buttons on. Jose, go ahead. He's got a question. So go ahead, Jose.
So you told us how to download the PC Health. What's it called? The Windows PC Health.
Yeah, the Windows 11.
program.
Yeah, it's supposed to check to see if your computer can run Windows 11. Yeah.
Do you have like a specific one you want me to download, or like to choose?
Yeah, it's from Microsoft. It's the Windows. I didn't think you'd have. Did I put a link to it? Health check for Windows 11. I'll just post it into the chat. I'll put it up on the. Yeah, it's just the Windows PC health check here. So. Were you not able to find that, or?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. So I've got a here. I've got a link to the direct download here. I'll just copy the link here and put it in chat. And I'll post it. I'll post that on the chat or on the Canvas as well. But so the health, yeah, the PC health checker thing, basically it's just going to scan your computer and it's going to tell you if it meets system requirements or not, which sometimes is kind of goofy. Like I've got two computers at home that are identical, and one of them, it was telling it couldn't run, and one of them, it said it failed the check, but it's already running Windows 11 anyway because they had it signed in under that update program. So here, give me a second here. There we go. Okay, so yeah, that was on your. So yeah, if there's stuff that comes up like that. Also, if you can't find something or something isn't clear, that would be a great thing to post into the class discussion area and get help from other students over the weekend, right? So, or even from me as well. So it pops up on my phone if there's new posts onto the discussion area. So that would be a good thing to take a look at and see what's going on. So the PC health check was one thing to take a look at. And then I had you guys trying to do screenshots. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it was just a quick little exercise. I was hoping it wasn't going to be too much of a hassle, but if you weren't able to find the PC Health Check app, I just posted the link to it. I will post that into onto the announcement section of the 115 class here. So I'll put that into the announcements there. And like I said, if you guys are, for these assignments and stuff, typically they have a due date, but what happens with Canvas is that it'll let you submit stuff typically after the due date too. So even if you don't get it done by the due date, I mean, ideally that's when you should have it done. But if it's better to turn stuff in, even if you had problems with something for some reason, like today, if you couldn't find the PC Health Check app or you weren't able to find it online, then still do the assignment. Let's see, when was that one due here? So, oh yeah, okay. So it was supposed to be due. It's due actually tonight. Actually, I clicked on the 18th, but it assigned it to be the 18th at 11:59, which is kind of funny. I'll just bump this out another day or so you guys can find that. So I thought if you would have the name on there. I'll put a direct link in here as well. There we go. Make it easy for you guys. Okay. So the idea is that you just run this. So did anybody else back up a little bit? How many people were able to find the PC Health Check MSI file and run it? Okay. So it's an MSI, which means it's a Microsoft installer file. MSI has come up later as well because like in our server class, you have the option to install stuff over the network. And one of the files that's an easy thing to install is an MSI, a Microsoft installer file, and that can be pushed across the network pretty easily. So at any rate, how many people, did anybody have their computer fail? Like it says it won't run Windows 11. A couple of you, one of mine did. It said this processor was too old, that it wouldn't run. So you guys that are saying, so Finn, you don't have your camera, but what was wrong with your computer? What part failed? Do you remember?
I ran it on the like the school computer and the processor, and there was one other thing.
Okay. Yeah, those have an older, so one of them is the processor age. So like one of my computers at home, it's a decent processor, but it's pretty old. And so because I think the requirements are that it's only like 1 gigahertz, but the newer processors it will pass, and the old ones it won't. Rigo, question, comment, go for it.
Did you want us to run the health check on our personal computers or the school computers?
Either one. Most people just have their own personal computer that they're playing with, and those school computers. We were going to talk about that too. You guys that picked up the school systems, the initial assignment was to take them apart, put them back together, just kind of play with them a little bit. You don't have passwords to them, so you're going to end up having to reinstall something to it. So but we're getting to that. That's one of the next things we'll talk about, is making installation disks of some kind, whether it's a Linux installation or Windows 10 or whatever. Ryan, go ahead.
So I have a quick question. It's a little off topic, but so with
No such thing.
I have a Oculus 2 for VR,
Okay.
and I tried this thing called V Spectral Office, and it's basically a virtual office. And I was gonna ask next Monday on Zoom conference if I could use that, because it has a kind of camera audio for like meetings, and I was gonna ask if it would be okay if I tried that next time.
Sure. I did have a student that played with that a little bit last year, and so he was using his Oculus for our Zoom sessions. He didn't do it for very long because a normal camera works pretty well as well. But he had this funny little avatar too. So at our end, what we saw with this was this weird little avatar. So yeah, give it a try. Are you talking about during class, Ryan? Like during our class session?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. It may not be practical for everything, but if you want to give it a try, other people might be kind of curious about it as well. And you have the Oculus VR?
Yeah, I have the Oculus 2.
Okay.
Quest.
Oculus Quest. Yeah, that was one of the, so when those first came out, the students wanted to buy an Oculus Rift, I think it was called at the time. This was a few years back, and that's when those first came out, and they were kind of almost still in beta. So we didn't buy that one. And then what we ended up getting a couple of years later was the HTC Vive. And it seems to be okay. It's like, I think that's the first generation too, is the HTC. And it works okay. They're kind of interesting technology for sure. So, okay. Somebody's asking in the chat, Kyle's asking what the program was called. Is it, oh, so somebody answered vSpatial, it says something. Okay. Yeah. All righty, cool. Yeah, go ahead. And then and if you can show us, you can share your screen. Can you share your own screen when you're in there? That's what we had the other student do sometimes.
Yeah, I can.
Share his screen a little bit and see, so we can sort of, it obviously isn't going to be in 3D or whatever, but we could still see a little bit of what you're doing. Yeah, I don't care. Whatever you guys can do to make this more entertaining or somehow more interactive. May not be something you want to do every day, but Ryan, give it a try, and then it's also a technology thing to figure it out and make it work. So I don't think VR is going anywhere. It's going to keep getting better and better. And you might see more and more uses for it that would be non-gaming, right? You know, you might see more interactive learning stuff, people using it to maybe do, practice being a doctor, stuff like that, right? Doing virtual operations, practicing on stuff. So yeah, there's going to be more and more practical applications for it. But right now, most of it's just for gaming. But I know they have like a virtual restaurant game. I guess if you want to learn how to make French fries or flip burgers, you can do a virtual restaurant. I don't know, it's goofy, but all right. So at any rate, today we're just going to briefly talk about some of the assignments. So again, the assignment was just to download the Windows PC Health program and run it, scan your system, and then take a screenshot. So it was supposed to be an easy assignment, but it was going to let me know if anybody has problems taking screenshots. That's a common way that I have you guys show or submit work that we're working on, because it lets me know that you're actually doing this stuff at home, right? If we're in the classroom, we'd all be playing with this stuff, and I can just wander around and say, oh, okay, yeah, I download this, and people do it. It's a little bit harder for me at home to know that you guys are working on whatever, kind of keep track of where everybody's at. And also with the quizzes, when you guys are taking your quizzes, obviously it's not like there's a timed component, or it's, you can't use your books, right? So basically your quizzes are open book. You can use the internet if you want, even. As I mentioned before, when you're doing the quiz, if you Googled something and there's some discrepancy with it and what the book says, we kind of go with what the book says, because there's, sometimes going to be slight discrepancies, things like that. But almost all the questions are, like right out of the book. So for the hardware class, I believe you guys have a short quiz. How many questions were on that?
Let's see, what it's like 27
Yeah, 26 questions. Yeah, 20. Now this one's a new one for me too. So like I said, these books are new this quarter for me, using them as well. So these had a different type of test bank. The test bank is supposed to kind of mimic the CompTIA question. So if you guys weren't familiar, CompTIA, TIA is usually capitalized, CompTIA.org. If you go to their website, you can check out a little bit more about the certifications. And that might be something that some of you would be interested in, maybe next quarter or at the end of the school year, is maybe going in and taking some certification exams. It helps in a sense to get your resume noticed a little bit, so you've got a degree, you're taking classes, maybe you also want to look at getting a certification possibly. So the CompTIA stuff is good. They're good entry-level certifications. But where I was going with this, with your quiz, is that how many of you started the quiz for the hardware class, taking a look at it? Okay, a couple of you. All right, so a couple of them have these little questions like, okay, they're called scenario questions. So you read, there's a little paragraph, and it's basically describing a situation, and then you're supposed to pick the correct answer. And when I say correct, there may be other answers that are also sort of correct, but usually they have one answer that's quote unquote the most correct answer. Does that make sense? So they have some things in there that are kind of half right. and then they have one that they really want as, you know, the answer. I did not give you guys any of the questions that have more than one answer. So they had some where you had to pick 2 or more answers from the group, and those do make them more difficult, right? So like, you know, if you're trying to pick out answers, maybe it's A and C or B and C or A and D. You have a lot more variables there than just having one correct answer. So for the first quiz, I was kind of taking it easy on you guys and just kind of gave you the questions that had, you know, one distinct answer, right? So you don't have multiple questions, right? Because the multiple response, what they call multiple response, are more difficult. You got to figure out which ones you want, and there's a lot more variables there. But at any rate, and the scenario questions are similar to what's on the CompTIA stuff. So like you'll you know, be taking the CompTIA exam, and it might say, okay, here's a little scenario, here's the possible problem or solutions to the problem, which solution or maybe which multiple solutions would you pick to solve that problem. But yeah, that one's not due till the 25th. There will be another one popping up. What's in the chat here right now? All right. So yeah, there will be another quiz popping up here soon for the other class. So don't procrastinate too long with the hardware, the 110 one. You guys that are in both classes, I know there's just a couple of you that are in one or the other, but not in both classes. For the most part, these two classes kind of go back to back, and they're designed kind of to run that way. You guys that have taken a look at it so far, do you have any questions or running any weirdness on the quiz? Because like I say, it's a new test bank for me too. So, I'm just getting used to the style of questions and what they've got there. And so I'm like, creating the test in Canvas, I have to take all the questions and like kind of copy and paste them. So if something looks goofy, please let me know. It's probably my fault for, doing it, setting it up weird.
Yeah, it's fine. It's all good to go. I was just curious if it was specifically like if you're going to do a quiz that had both of them together, but you just answeed that. So it's just the hardware and then
both classes.
Yeah.
It's really tough for me to do because the way Canvas is laid out is that it's got, there are two distinct classes, obviously, in Canvas. Occasionally what I will do is have an assignment that both classes are doing, and I'll post the assignment in. So that's a good question, actually. Whoever said that. So sometimes there will be an assignment that will be in both classes, and it will be the exact same assignment. So whatever answers you get from one class, just copy and paste them into the other class too. And it's a way for me to balance out the stuff in the grade book for Canvas. But otherwise, as far as the quizzes go, they'll be discrete for each class. And I will try to keep them as two separate classes as much as I can. For the most part, almost everybody is in both classes. I have 2 students that are in the machining program. And because there was a conflict, they're just watching the recordings, and then they kind of check in with me every once in a while because they are actually here on campus. They're over in the other classroom. But okay, so anyway, you got a quiz that looks like it's chapters 1, 2, and 3. We'll be talking about RAM here pretty quickly as well, memory upgrades, stuff like that. And I was just looking at the ebook. So quickly here, I'll share my screen here. This is the ebook for, again, the software. So the software operating system, stuff like that. There's some projects one of them I just wanted to point out is the system information utility. It's something that most people know exists, although with the newer versions of Windows 10 and in particular Windows 11, you can't get to it very easily. Either that or I'm missing it. So I'm going to share my screen here. So at the end of chapter 1, they mentioned, running msinfo32.exe. Now that's a goofy thing to try to remember, right? To type that in. Now, anytime you have an executable, you don't have to type in the .exe part of it, right? So if you're just typing this in, and I'm typing it into my search bar here, so let me stop the share. All right, I'll share this screen if I can here. That's going to be weird, sharing the one that I'm on. All right, so I'm on Windows 11, so I'm hoping you're seeing the tool. Do you guys see the toolbar at the bottom as well? Okay, I wasn't sure if it's just sharing the screen. All right, so in this first chapter, the first couple of chapters have you doing some stuff with Windows 10, just kind of exploring the interface. What I would encourage you guys to do is to to use that to kind of just brush up on your skills or possibly learn something new about the way people are setting stuff up. Any rate, so with Windows 11, your toolbar has now a little bit more centralized. To run programs, you can just type in the search bar. Now, if I'm looking for system information, I might just type in system information, right? And then have it come up. So I'm just looking for it. System information pops up. You could also type in MS info like they were doing, if you happen to remember that. But I'm remembering it by system information. Now it's an app here. Under the other versions of Windows, you could right click on your start button and then you'd have a system icon on your start under your main menu here. That's not popping up. Now this can be customized as well. So I'm still playing around with the Windows 11. One thing I find that's kind of annoying is if you click on the start button here, or not the start button, you have to go over here to power down the system. I'm used to just having stuff in the lower left-hand corner. They've kind of centralized it here, which maybe that is more useful for touch screens or tablets or something like that. But I'm still kind of getting used to the Windows 11 utility. But the system information one, that's something that I use quite a bit. So it just popped up. I've got a laptop that's got a dead battery. And I was looking around on the front of the laptop and on the back and stuff like that. I was looking for the specific model number. So it said HP EliteBook, but when I launched the system information tool, which is popping up somewhere. There it is. Okay, so when I launched system information, I'll put the little, I've got toolbars and stuff open all over the place. It will tell you the actual model of the particular computer you're at as well. As long as it is a factory built computer, it has that programmed in on the motherboard for its system information. If you're using a system that is like custom built, you might see the motherboard manufacturer and the motherboard model there. But for like my laptop, it told me exactly which laptop I had. So then I could order a new battery for it. And batteries are pretty cheap these days, you know, just for knockoff. It's not a genuine HP battery. So if any of you have a laptop and the battery starts to degrade on it, that is an upgrade path or basically just a replacement path for the batteries. This particular laptop, I'll bring it in tomorrow when we're in the hardware section. It's actually pretty easy to work on. The entire back of it comes off pretty quickly. Other laptops might be a little more buried in there. And if you're working on an Apple laptop, then more power to you. Those things are, you know, pretty goofy to work on. I've taken one apart and the battery wasn't even like one piece. The battery was in separate pieces, kind of glued into the case with little ribbon cables attaching it. So it was pretty crazy. Okay, so this is the system information tool. This is where you can also get information about the BIOS on your computer, the BIOS version that it's running. So in case we were talking about upgrading or flashing a BIOS to a newer version, it gives you information about the processor that's here. This one's running an i7 7700K, 4 cores, 8 logical. So as we start talking about CPUs and stuff, so this can give you guys a good rundown of your computer hardware. Now there are aftermarket programs as well that can do very similar things and also give you more information about your system as well. And I'll be posting some of those and you can try those out. But the basic system information tool is pretty handy right off the bat that you guys can run on your systems here. So that was a quick one at the end of, you guys don't have to do those activities necessarily, but some of them might be useful. So I would encourage you guys to take a look at the hands-on projects that are at the end of each chapter. And if it's not something you're familiar with, just do it. I mean, I'm not going to have you guys do the system information and take a screenshot of it. Now we'll do some of that as we get into more detailed or more complex projects for sure. But if you haven't used it, system information, boom, easy to get to. It's included within Windows, at least for the time being, but you have to remember what it's called, right? So you can't just like start clicking around there. It may still be included in the menu somewhere. Maybe it's under settings or whatever. I was looking for it in Windows 11. But if you can remember what these things are called, then that's half the battle. So you can search for them. The search box in Windows has gotten better, so you can search through applications and system utilities right there. So, all right. And then it has you guys installing apps and stuff. The application that we talked about last week, or I posted it into the Canvas as well, there was a pretty cool little app for Wi-Fi, or was that my security class? Did I mention the Wi-Fi app to you guys?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. It's actually pretty cool. If so, the hands-on project at the end of chapter 1 was installing and uninstalling apps using the Microsoft Store. So as opposed to downloading programs or installing programs with an executable or an MSI file, you're installing apps similar to you would install on like a tablet or a phone or whatever. But the one that I found that was pretty cool, I'll share this. So basically at the end of chapter 1, it has you using the Microsoft App Store. And there are some advantages and disadvantages to something that's an app as opposed to a traditional program. At first, I didn't like the apps much, but they've kind of grown on me a little bit. But the one that I was using, if you have wireless on your computer, is a Wi-Fi analyzer program. And so here, I'll just share my screen again. So. All right, so if you haven't used the App Store, I think most of you probably have, so it's not going to be anything new. But one of the things at the end of the chapter was uninstalling and reinstalling and uninstalling applications as opposed to adding and removing programs. So there's a little bit of a difference between the add remove programs. The other thing that they have is adding and removing features. So Windows features can be added and removed. So this Wi-Fi analyzer is kind of cool. Basically, I just search for Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi analyzer, and what it does is it will look at different networks. I'll share the application or share my whole screen actually, so you guys can see it easier. So my security class, we've been talking about wireless security a little bit. So this one can show different networks that are available and the relative signal strength of the different networks, which is kind of handy. My wireless adapter that I've got plugged in is just this little USB one. So it does not have a 5 gigahertz option. But if you had that, you would be able to switch back and forth between 2.4 gigahertz. And 2.4 typically has a longer range that it can reach usually, but will have less bandwidth for ultimate, throughput in terms of your wireless capacity. So anyway, here's my different networks that I have available. I can show different networks this way as well. The relative signal strength is also here. So you get a signal strength meter, so you can tell which networks are more or less in range, I guess you'd say. So anyway, it's kind of cool. There's different apps that you can download off the App Store, and that was one that I was using just recently. And it's an easy way to find stuff too. So if you're looking for software, you can just search through the application store, which is kind of similar to Linux, where Linux has these software libraries as well called repositories. So it's a good way to find stuff that way. You might be able to find the same sort of thing as a program if you're just searching for it on the net. One thing I also like to do is search for, I might look for open source. If I'm looking specific for, open source Wi-Fi analyzer, and I might find something that way, or I might not. So the apps are another way to look for stuff. The other program I was going to show you guys, it's related to your system information tool, is one called Speccy. There's a bunch of these out there, but Speccy will show you a whole bunch of stuff about your operating system and hardware in a pretty quick glance. Just get the free one. Okay, we'll click OK, get the free software. Just thinking about it. There it is. So this one's an executable, but I'll post the link in here too. So
I've used CC Cleaner before.
yeah, that's the parent company. And then Speccy is the individual program, which is basically just doing like a system analysis. So it looks at your, I'll put it in chat here if you guys want it, and I'll later on I'll put it up on the other thing here. So, so Speccy does, there it is. And it asked me if I want to make changes. So the UAC, the user account control, we were talking about that last week too. So the user account control, since this is an executable, it's asking me, do I want to run that? So the UAC is what it's abbreviated as well. UAC is basically there is another check and balance on the system to be able to, there it is. All right, so if you can still see my screen, I've got a bunch of stuff open here. Are you guys seeing the Speccy program on my screen at this point? Yeah, all right. So it's nothing too fancy. It's another program that is in addition to system information. So this is kind of related to, you know, the first couple of chapters. We're looking at our computer systems with the eye towards, you know, what can we upgrade possibly? You know, is there a weak link on our system? We've been talking about, you know, if you've got a gaming system, what is the weak link? You know, is it your processor? Is it your video card? Is it the amount of RAM that you have? So as the book is laid out, this, you know, the hardware book is laid out with kind of like what's inside the case, and then it goes over each component. So motherboard, CPU, RAM, video cards, kind of, you know, going through each component as we get there. So Speccy is pretty handy. I don't know if I can make this, that's not gonna. So it shows me how much RAM I've got. I've got 32 gigs of RAM. It kind of gives me a summary, an overall summary of it. This would be a good one to, you know, if you weren't sure what was inside of a computer and you were trying to figure it out. Motherboard, it's just, mine's just got a Dell. It gives me the actual model number of the motherboard. That can be hard information to figure out if you're running, like I said, a Dell computer where it's all comes pre-packaged. You know, finding the actual model number might be a little bit difficult. So it shows me the chipset is the KB Lake chipset. In the hardware class, it gets into chipsets, motherboards a little bit more. This is good information to have on your own systems if you're trying to figure out what you've got. Graphics, it's got 2 graphics cards installed into it, neither one of which is super awesome, but it's got 2 graphics cards. They're an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060, right? So, you know, decent card, but it's not a gaming system, right? So it's not designed to have, you know, huge storage. It gives me an idea of what hard drives are in here. This one has a smaller SSD that it boots from, and then a larger traditional hard drive that is for data storage. So it's got a couple of them in there. All right, operating system, Windows 11 Pro 64-bit. Tells me when it was installed, serial number, blah, blah, blah. So it gives me some current information about the operating system and then how long it's been running. So at any rate, Speccy is a pretty good program. There's other programs out here that are similar. If you're trying to get a rundown on a system and trying to figure out exactly what it's running. This is also kind of handy. Here's the CPU, and it shows me the current temperature of each core of the CPU. Now there's other programs that you can get that'll run in your toolbar that will show you current. I kind of like running stuff like that, like gives me an idea of current temperature. It's something that I think that it seems like that Microsoft would have incorporated that into the operating system itself. Like, you know, you'd have temperature, fan speed, stuff like that as part of the operating system. But right now, what we have to have are like third-party utilities, and then you can pin them to your start menu or down in the corner of the screen, and it'll tell you like how hot your CPU is, you know, maybe how hot your graphics processing unit, your GPU is, stuff like that. So mine is currently sitting at 41 degrees Celsius, which isn't too hot. It's not bad. How many of you ever heard of the TJ Maxx temperature? It's not the store. There's a TJ Maxx that's the store too.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Okay. For each processor that you have, so if you know what processor you have, you can look up, and basically it's a thermal maximum. It's what temperature the CPU can get to. before it starts slowing itself down to save itself, right? So processors will start to slow down and kind of throttle themselves backwards if they get to a certain temperature. And so you can look up and see, okay, what temperature, so that gives you an idea of like your maximum temperature that your CPU should get to. So if you're monitoring system temperature, it gives you an idea of the, my thing, I'm getting hot, because 40 degrees Celsius, that doesn't sound very hot, right? How hot is that in, let's see here, I guess I'll have to look it up here. So 40 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit, that is 104 degrees. That isn't very hot actually for a CPU. That's still very, very within the cool.
I don't know. You can always delid your CPU and squeeze a little more out of it.
Yeah.
That's actually one of my, I've never experienced that, but I've watched plenty of videos and I've always wanted to do it, but I don't have the skills or the hardware to, you delid it, then use a liquid metal and all that.
Oh boy, yeah, no, that I think, for me, if I'm running, running a processor and I've put the good thermal compound on it and it's got a decent heat sink, or the last one I put together was liquid cooling, I'm good with that. I don't need to be delidding it, and I typically don't overclock the processors either. So, so I was just out of curiosity, looking up the temperature. It looks like it's closer to 100 degrees Celsius for. Yeah, so this, I'll share my screen again too. This is the ARC website for Intel processors. So for any processor that's out there, and this is actually kind of jumping ahead to the processor section, but for any processor that's out there, the arc.intel, you can just Google it or go to the web. It's easier to Google it and then it takes you right to the site. So this is the processor that's in my computer that I'm sitting at. And I was just curious what the maximum temperature it is before bad things start to happen. Is kind of the idea. It tells you it's a 7th generation processor. It's currently been discontinued. It tells you when it was launched. It was first quarter 1 of 2017. So it's getting to be a few years old at this point. It's a 4-core processor, but it can run multi-threading or hyper-threading, which we'll talk more about in the processor chapter. Tells me how many watts it draws and its clock frequency, but down at the bottom, I'll just skip down here. All right, the T junction or TJ max, it tells you the maximum temperature allowed at the processor die. So your processors have little thermal sensors on them. They'll tell you, what temperature it is. And if this thing gets up to 100 degrees Celsius, that's when it starts, needing to throttle itself. So if your computer's cooling system is not working properly, you might start getting blue screens of death, or it'll start throttling back and bad things will start happening at that point. So 100 degrees Celsius, I'm running 40 degrees right now. So that's well within specs for that particular computer. So, all right, what do we got going in the chat there? Oh, Kyle posted a video for us. Who knows? He might be Rick-rolling us. We don't even know what it is.
Oh, it's someone put baloney on the CPU. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, there's a couple of old videos too of people pulling heat sinks off of CPUs. And the older CPUs did not have thermal management on them, which means that the older CPUs, if you were running them and you pulled the heatsink off, they would go up in smoke just like that.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Yeah, the newer CPUs have thermal management. So what they do is the video shows them pulling the heatsink off and they're playing a video game, and all of a sudden the video game slows way down and gets really super choppy, but the system doesn't go up in smoke at least, which is nice. But all right. Okay, so at any rate, we're just kind of like we're all over the board this morning, but that's fine. So you guys have a quiz right now, and like I said, I don't consider it like cheating or anything like that. If you guys want to ask each other questions, at least you're getting to know each other a little bit and trying to figure out, you know, what the questions are asking or anything like that. And then I didn't notice any of them that were like too hardcore, but a few of them are these little scenario questions where it might be a little bit more about, you know, what in your opinion, which one of these is the better answer or something like that. Ryan's got his hand up. Go for it, Ryan. Question.
So I have a question on the hardware and building of the PC. So I'm been looking at trying to build a PC from my grandparents' old Dell Tower desktop,
Mhm.
and I want to build one that's strong enough to do VR of like wireless or even connection. So by your preference of like budget wise, how much do you think would be like the max affordability to really do that?
Yeah, that would be a great question for the class so Ryan, one of the assignments for the hardware class that we have kind of in the middle of the quarter is to you know, give ourselves a budget to basically window shop and to quote unquote build a computer for a certain purpose. And one of the ones we did a few years ago was in fact for virtual reality. So basically we said, you know, if you're wanting to put together a computer that will run a VR headset, and we picked the HTC Vive because that's the one that we happen to have in the classroom. And they have very specific system requirements. So like, for instance, when the students first bought the HTC Vive, the computer that we had in the classroom wouldn't run it. I mean, the video card that we had wouldn't do it. So we ended up having to buy another video card as well. We had a computer with a decent CPU and enough RAM and stuff, but the video card was really the weakest link in the chain. So that's a really good question that would lead us into, you know, potentially if we're going to pretend to build a computer, you want to pick a problem that you want to solve. Maybe you want to build a budget gaming computer, or in this case, we wanted to build a computer that would support a VR headset. So Ryan, do you have a VR headset, or is that something you're looking at purchasing down the road?
Well, I do have one. I have the Oculus Quest
Oh,
2,
that's right. Okay.
which has you can wirelessly connect it from the computer or desktop
Okay.
to it, or you can just take I forgot what the wire is called, but it basically goes to where the charging port is, and it connects to the headset and the computer.
Yeah, I'm
Messed
not
that
as
one up,
familiar
bro.
with that one. The
A
one
type
we've
C
got,
maybe.
yeah, the one we've got has HDMI, and so it has to have like a USB connector. It doesn't do wireless at all. It runs, you know, it's got a power cable that runs to it. So you're, you know, when you're wearing it, you have to be aware of the fact that you're on a leash and you can't just go running around the classroom or whatever. But it's got HDMI, and it needed a certain level of video card to support the frame rate. That was the big issue with ours, is that, you know, you're wearing these goggles and they have to have a very high frame rate so that it doesn't look choppy and weird when you're wearing it. So I'm trying to remember what video card we bought, but it was a pretty decent one. So
Ryan, if anything, just to piggyback, I would look at like the minimum system requirements and kind of get a benchmark of what hardware you might have, and then versus what you might need to get.
yeah.
But if I would say anything, like a 10 series and above GPU, so like a 1080, 1070, 1060 is probably where you're going to land.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with the Oculus, the current version of it. So it may have I'm not sure if it has a video card kind of built into the system. So if it's meant to be able to do wireless, maybe it's not depending on the computer quite so much. With our HTC Vive, I mean, it literally needs, you know, it's running everything through that video card. So it needed a fairly high end. But yeah, Ryan, or that suggestion, you know, look up the specs for, you know, if it's a game that you're trying to run, you know, look up specs for the game. If it's the Oculus, it's probably got some system specifications, you know, minimum, recommended, you know, and then go with the recommended system settings or something close to it. But
Alrighty, thank you.
yeah, and we can, you know, that'd be a good one for class discussion too. I'm interested in VR as well. I mean, you know, we had one in the classroom and it was pretty fun to play with. It was, you know, it's still obviously just a toy, but they're starting to be more and more used for other purposes, training, stuff like that. But yes, that's a good And that would be a good segue to our hardware class. If we're looking at down the road, one of our assignments, like I said, is I'll say, okay, we're going to be building a, home theater computer or a VR headset computer or a gaming system. And usually we give ourselves a set, like some money to play with. One time I didn't give anybody a budget, and we had people buying like, the most expensive of everything. And they were building like $10,000 computers, which is fun, to kind of think about, but not very realistic. I mean, if you're just buying the most expensive video card or two of them or whatever, it doesn't really lend itself to making a decision. You're just buying, oh, I'll take the most expensive of everything and slap it in a computer. But so we'll be thinking about what we might want to build as far and what our budgets might be to kind of come up with a realistic budget. So. Okay, so it looks like your quiz is due on the 25th at midnight or whatever. There's 26 questions. Yeah, give yourselves, time to ask questions about those online if you're on the Discord server. But don't procrastinate too much longer. Today's the 18th, and you're going to have another quiz coming out fairly quickly for the software class. So that was the hardware, the 110 class. If you're in both classes, you kind of stagger them both, and then there'll be another one for the networking class too. That was just the 20 questions that were true false, just to kind of get the ball rolling. And I know fall quarter is tough because we've got three, a lot of you are in 3 of these classes, whereas most quarters you're just going to be in 1 or 2 of my classes, and then you'll have other classes that you're taking as well. So I don't, this quarter I don't want to overload you too much, but it's good to kind of keep the ball rolling and make sure you're staying up to date so that you're not falling too far behind.
Oh, Dave, have you any more thoughts or information on labs coming up if you want to come?
Yeah, I'm still working with my dean, the school here. They're supposed to come in and look at my classroom and tell me I can have X number of students in here at one time, whatever that happens to be. So, and it's pretty messy in here too. I'm gonna have to clean up. That might be a good first project, is cleaning stuff up a little bit, and then I'll have people spread out in the classroom, and then you can use the computers in here. It's probably going to be more important too next quarter when we're installing server and stuff like that. So I'm hoping to get something going this quarter, maybe even just as a test. I might have it just be for my second year students right now. They're a much smaller group, and it'll be easier to get them in here. But yeah, if you guys have an interest in it and want to come in and, play around with some stuff, I've got 2 3D printers in here that need to be set back up and get going again.
Never used one of those. I've always wanted to, but
yeah, they're kind of fun. We were printing out, goofy little. Well, the most popular thing at the end of the quarter was little baby Yodas. They were printing out little plastic baby Yoda figurines. Nothing at all useful, but they were cool looking. So that's always something fun to play with. But yeah, Kyle, I'll try to get a better answer for you guys. Just hang tight. The dean was talking about just getting stuff set up for winter quarter, but I would still like to get at least a few people in here, maybe the second year students, because there's only, a half dozen of them in this one class that are just, so it'd be probably easier to get them in there than 20 of you. We for sure, I don't think can have 20 people in here at one time. That's too many to have in the lab at one time. So. But yeah, and it's still a weird deal. I mean, I know they're running some classes that are face to face. They've just got them way spread out, or like the automotive program. They've got the doors open and it's kind of opened up, and so it's definitely a weird time. I appreciate you guys kind of sticking with this and trying to work through whatever difficulties we have. I guess that's just how things are right now. Ryan, another question. Go for it. Got a couple minutes.
Yeah. So quick question on whole 3D printers. Has anyone tried building, because I've seen quite a few of the videos, and people use 3D printers and the pretty big ones to make armor, Mandalorian or clone, or stuff like that.
The cosplay stuff, you mean, where people are dressing up like Star, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Our 3D, we have one 3D printer that's smaller, and it can print stuff. It can print stuff about this tall, and then the other one has a taller armature on it, and you could print something that's maybe about 12 inches tall. So if you were doing it in pieces, maybe, but yeah, some people have bigger 3D printers, and you can print out larger objects. I was surprised how long it takes to print stuff out. Both of ours are, halfway decent printers, but it'll take a long time to print out an object. And then sometimes if you have a failure in the middle of the print job, if you come in the next day and it just goes haywire and you've got like all these little threads of stuff all over the place and you have to start the print job over again. So yeah, they're definitely, getting them set up and getting them tuned and everything and working is definitely you got to have some patience to do it. So I'm amazed when people are printing out, these large projects like a suit of armor or something crazy like that. I mean, that had to have taken them, hundreds of hours to print out and get them set up and stuff. So pretty crazy stuff. Yeah, those cosplayers, they've got some time invested in their in their costumes for sure. Okay, we're out of time for today, so we'll meet back here tomorrow. Start working on your quiz, and if you've got questions, post them up on Discord for other students, and maybe get some class discussion going that way would be a good thing. And but don't procrastinate too much longer. Okay, we'll see you guys tomorrow if there aren't any other questions, or bring your questions in tomorrow for us. So, okay.
See you later. Appreciate it.